Right. Our stories today. Reform. Are they left-wing? Farage calls to scrap the two-child benefit cap. Angela Rayner says no comment whilst 1.5 million kids go hungry. And finally, how to help the housing crisis. Increase taxes on landlords. As always, though, remember to like the stream. And if you're not subscribed, then please hit that button. Help us reach our goal of 40,000 subscribers. By the end of the year, I do think it's a possible goal. I'm always saying that it is. We'll be getting to your comments at the end, so please make sure you're busy in the chat. So, on to our first story. Nigel Farage has just called for scrapping the two-child benefit cap and restoring universal winter fuel payments. Moves aimed squarely at Labour's traditional working class base. But I don't want anyone to be fooled by the things that Farage says, as per usual, because this is not moral. This is certainly tactical. Farage is the same man who, number one, opposed paid maternity leave in the EU Parliament, supported slashing public sector jobs by 50%, whilst backing a flat tax that would favour the rich, and finally led the Brexit campaign that damaged the UK manufacturing sector, especially in working class regions. So what makes this whole debacle even more hilarious is The Spectator. Yes, that bastion of elite conservatism just called Reform UK's welfare stance left wing. And that's how far the political centre's been dragged right. Basic compassion now looks like Bolshevism. But let's not be fooled. Farage isn't fighting for the working class. He's using their pain to power his brand. He now claims to care about working class families, but his party, Reform UK, opposed sick pay reform, rejected minimum wage rises, and offered no plan for public sector investment. That is fake populism. All punchlines, no solidarity with the classes. But he's gaining ground because Labour has left the door wide open. Keir Starmer refused for over a year to commit to scrapping the such a tongue twister, two-child benefit cap, a policy that leaves 1.5 million children in poverty and disproportionately affects single mothers and ethnic minority families. Despite overwhelming pressure from his own MPs, Labour mayors and child poverty campaigners, Starmer clung to austerity logic, calling it a matter of fiscal responsibility, those dreaded words that keep coming out of his mouth. Only now, facing Farage's stunt, is Labour reportedly considering another U-turn. And it's not the first retreat. Labour also cut back the winter fuel allowance, as we know, restricting it to pension credit recipients, a move that excluded up to 1.7 million pensioners, many too proud or confused to apply. Meanwhile, the wealth gap yawns. The UK's richest 50 families own more than the poorest 33 million people combined. Neither party talks about wealth taxes, rent caps, nationalising energy, or reversing NHS outsourcing. They're managing decline, not delivering justice. So we're left with a right-wing demagogue cosplaying as Robin Hood and a Labour leadership so afraid of upsetting the status quo, it forgets who it's supposed to fight for. And I think we can all conclude that it's not a battle of ideas, it's a race to the bottom, and working class people deserve better than being propped in someone else's performance. I want to bring Lewis in. Lewis, why is a life enemy
Sarah, your mic literally just in the last few seconds just went off and on again.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, can you get slightly closer to your microphone?
Yes, I can.
I think the noise cancelling was cutting you out.
Oh my God. Terrible. Can people hear me now?
Yeah, absolutely clear and absolutely
Okay.
fine. Could you repeat your question for me?
My question, Lewis, is why is Farage, a lifelong enemy of social welfare, suddenly calling to scrap the two-child cap? What actually is his angle?
It's just all economic populism in lots of ways. And obviously, there's been a lot of research recently, right? And a lot of polling and a lot of data coming out showing that a lot of people in this country are economically left. And actually, reform voters overwhelmingly, when it comes to policy, are actually economically left in lots of ways. This, libertarian, conservative kind of capitalistic view on the world is still very much held by people like reform conservatives, these types of elites. But they still haven't convinced people to, almost like adapt this American idea of, complete free market capitalism, even though they don't have that anyway, to, be the best model. They still can't do that. So the only way that they can obviously pursue power is by being, socially right on lots of issues. But the only pathway to power is to be economically left with the type of people that Nigel Farage and the Reform Party need to target, right? And when I looked at the original announcement of how they were going to fund this, I think Nigel Farage said they were going to stop the asylum hotels, scrap net zero, and I can't remember what the third thing was. But it just goes back to, again, like saying popular things to popular people, and not really actually making sense of any of the policy. Because once you dig down into things like, okay, asylum hotels, okay, where are those people going to go? Oh, you're going to deport them. Do you know how much money that costs? Do you know how hard that is? Do you know how long that will take? Again, it's just saying things that might sound popular to certain people, without any actual substance, without any actual plan. And it's his only pathway to power. He can't just, continue being like a conservative, or obviously libertarian when it comes to his politics. He has to try and appeal to people to broaden his church.
Yeah, this is the thing. And I think we speak about this all the time. The power of populism when it comes to garnering momentum and votes. And it seems that that is definitely Farage's. I think that's his approach to the whole thing. So what does it actually tell us that Farage is now weaponizing welfare issues? Because he's not someone who's actually interested in social welfare, in upping the working classes. You've listed a number of things where he's actually ignored or opposed certain aspects that would benefit the most vulnerable or minoritized in the community. Why is it working so successfully with his rhetoric?
Because I feel like even though the people who find his plans appealing, it's still not enough. And it's also about finding something to win Labour over on, right? They're being demonized as these people, rightfully so, for not lifting the two-child benefit cap, for getting rid of the winter fuel payment. So he needs to position himself in a way which is appealing to these people who have been absolutely put off by Labour. And obviously we know, even though the Tory party have been attacking Labour on this, we know that Kemi Badenoch previously said that she believes in means testing for the winter fuel payments. And Kemi Badenoch is not the type of person who even believes in things like child benefits or child welfare and any of these things. She's very much in that gut park of don't have kids if you can't afford them. And if you want to give them a good life, you've got to work harder. So they're trying to position themselves, I don't know, uniquely compared to these two parties. And obviously now we've got the Labour U-turns. Excuse me. They're going to, look at winter fuel payments. They're looking at reversing the two-child benefit cap. But are they doing that because it's the right thing? Are they doing that because of the backlash? Or are they doing that only to try and stop reform outflanking them? Either way, it's almost kind of like politics working right in a weird way, though, right? Because
Yeah.
when a party does something unpopular and it's unpopular with the public and pressure mounts on them and people see that as an opportunity to, get political points over them, it makes them respond. So you could argue the political system is actually working right for once in a way, as opposed to people constantly opposing each other on, almost like being who's going to be the most right wing or the most conservative or who's going to be the most fiscally conservative. You've got Nigel Farage coming in saying, all these poor people, I'm going to give you more money back that you previously had. He's not making promises of, something that's non-existent, something that he's just going to make up on the spot. He's giving something people tangible, and it might work with some of these people. So obviously we'll have to see what the response is. Reform is still, topping the polls. The Labour are still slowly going down. But ultimately, again, what scares me, and I don't expect everybody to read the contracts, read the manifestos, but it's just pure populism. There's no substance to this policy. There's no plan to fund it.
Yeah, absolutely. But with the way that Labour are moving, would you not expect them to kind of gain popularity? Because, like you said, everyone's kind of like politically right. So they're all kind of like somewhat saying the same things, somewhat leaning in the same direction. How are Labour not gaining the popularity that they could potentially be gaining when they're echoing the things that Reform are echoing too? Like there are some similarities at the moment with certain policies and the certain U-turns that are being made by Labour. How are they not garnering some momentum?
I think it's more to do with the disappointment, right? We potentially, in the past, we've all seen massive change come when somebody new comes into power. In theory, this happened with Biden, despite all the issues I have with him. He got through what was essentially the equivalent of child benefit in the US and sent everybody checks. He enacted lots of economic policy, which did help a lot of people. And probably people at the beginning of that did maybe feel it a little bit better. When obviously Labour came in 1997, they made some choices which did take away actually people's benefits, and people forget that. But ultimately, a lot of people did feel better off. They doubled the education budget. They brought in lots of stuff which gave people lots of welfare, lots of benefits, lots of support, and lots of programs which helped people. So people probably felt that changed and relief from so many years of the Tories. But we've just had 14 years of Tories, and people still feel worse off. Yeah, obviously, there's the whole idea of you need to give Labour more time, which in some sense is true, right? But people don't feel any different. People feel worse off. And when you've also got the right wing media on top of that, and also the left in general just constantly attacking Labour, people aren't going to feel any better off. So I think even if they start to make good decisions, if they make these U-turns, it's not going to gain them any political points. People need to feel real change, not to go back to necessarily just where they were a few years ago financially, but they need to feel it, and they need to tell a better story with it as well, because we know that on top of Labour making terrible decisions, they're also terrible communicators.
Terrible communicators. I think that's reflecting at the moment. And I think just on that last point, it leads very, very nicely into our next story.
Can I
Where,
just bring up one
yeah,
very quick point though, in terms because you
please.
obviously we were talking about the Spectator earlier.
Yes.
I just wanted to bring up like I posted a video today on my socials about the Spectator, about GB News, and about these kind of like people who are propping up, Nigel Farage and the Reform Party, and I just thought it was really interesting when the guy who owns GB News, Paul Marshall, went to a private school, and I thought I'd just do a little bit of digging, just a little
Love
bit of digging, Sarah.
it. Love it.
And
I
I
love
went,
it when Lewis has got his detective hat on. Goes
I
in a
went
rabbit hole.
because it obviously all lines up to kind of like where we are and the rhetoric. That's everything that's put out there in the media and what the stuff that people are eating up. That even when Nigel Farage goes left, he still gets somewhat support from the Spectator. He gets
Yeah.
support from GB News. But anyway, the point I want to get to is I looked up all the GB News hosts because this is what I do in my spare time. I couldn't find it for every single one of them, but almost every single one of them. 40% of them went to private school. Paul Marshall, the owner, went to private school. The Spectator, the last 4 editors, all went to private school. Our media in our society is being dominated by these private school people who don't actually really know anything about what people want economically, what would be better for them, what would actually help working people, because we are oversaturated in the media. And this isn't just right-wing media, by the way, it's all media, but right-wing media in particular. People, fighting over what's best for this country when ultimately they represent 7% of this country in terms of people who went to private school. And these are, what was the line that I saw the other day about like integration into society? It's not migrants who aren't integrated, it's these people who aren't integrated. They
Yeah.
aren't assimilated to the culture of the UK. These people got brought up so privileged that they're so disconnected from reality. And these are the people who are dictating pretty much most of the conversations that we talk about. And that's just really frustrating to me. So I just wanted to throw that out there while we were talking about the
No,
Spectator.
I completely agree with you. I think the minority here are the richest in society, the ones that have been able to access these elitist establishments and then have been able to get their foot in the door into media, into politics, into wherever they can actually affect some tangible change. And the change that does get affected is something that will impact the majority of the population, which is a working class majority. So it's interesting that you have a minority hold majority power over um, the majority of working class people. I don't know. It's a really, really weird power imbalance
Mm,
that I think needs to be um, looked at critically. But I'm actually going to 100% still that the people who do not assimilate into society are the richest in society, are the ones that have been to private schools. They're the
yeah.
ones that are assimilating. Completely agree with you. And that leads quite nicely into our second story, where I think we can really look into the Labour Party with a critical lens. Angela Rayner refuses to confirm if 2-child benefit cap will be abolished. When asked on Sunday with Laura Kussenberg if she would like to see the cap go, Rayner said, "I'm not going to speculate what our government is going to do. Let's have a look." We don't have the video, and that's probably my fault. But essentially, she was on there saying that she's not going to speculate on what the government's going to do, very much sitting on the fence. And you can check out that video probably on a BBC article, which is where I'd read it. But Angela Rayner was asked directly this week, will Labour scrap the 2-child benefit cap? And her answer was, I'm not going to speculate. Speculate what? This isn't a guessing game, Angela. It's 1.5 million children living with less because of a policy that punishes poor families for having more than 2 kids. The two-child gap is the single biggest driver of rising child poverty in Britain. It pushes over 250,000 children into poverty and traps another 850,000 deeper into hardship. The Resolution Foundation says scrapping it would lift 350,000 kids out of poverty immediately. And yet, Labour, the party of the welfare state, won't commit to ending it. Rayner has called the policy obscene. Starmer once said that it must go. Even the Archbishop of Canterbury, Gordon Brown, 50 plus charities, and the TUC want it scrapped. So, what's changed? One word, and it's cowardice. Labour is chasing swing voters in Middle England by keeping cruel Tory policies. They fear the optics of handouts, or as they like to call it, even as kids go hungry. But let's be clear, this is an economic caution, it's political triangulation, and it's leaving children behind. This is a defining test. Labour once lifted a million kids out of poverty under Blair. Now they're afraid to spend £3 billion to undo the most brutal benefit cap of the last decade. If Labour can't commit to this, what exactly is the point of a Labour government? Lewis, Labour historically introduced the welfare state and proudly lifted children out of poverty. Now, by hinting it might keep a Tory policy that drives poverty, has Labour under Starmer fundamentally lost its way? And what does, there's a double question, but what does the ambiguity signal about the party's transformation since the Corbyn era, or even since its 1945 Attlee government legacy?
Where do we even begin with this? What fr- what frustrates me is that even if they wanted to make the fiscal argument that it was just unaffordable right now, and they could have made a whole story about committing to it in the future, right? They've gone for this like fiscal conservatism promise, which has hurt them in so many ways. You know, they promised throughout the entire election that they wouldn't raise taxes on working people, without even being able to define what a working person is multiple times, which really put them in a corner because it gave them very little room to find the money that they apparently needed to find to fill this black hole that wasn't really a black hole because most people knew that it was there, with the exception of a few things that we didn't know about, but most of it we knew about. It's frustrating because if they would have just told a better story about how they could commit to it in the future, because that would be a very Labour thing to do, they could have avoided so much scrutiny with this. They could have avoided so much vitriol, so much bad press, so much loss in political points to say, right now, I'm really sorry, we cannot afford it. Which, by the way, is bullshit. They can afford it, and there are things that you can do. But even if they wanted to go for the story of, we're going to do it later, we promise we're going to do it later, we're going to try our hardest to fund this because we're passionate about bringing kids out of poverty. But right now, after 14 years of Tory rule, we just can't do it. Even if they would have gone with that, it would have been better than what they've done right now. You know, I was reading an article from Open Democracy just a couple of days ago. They published an article last week showing that the CEO of JP Morgan and Chase was lobbying Rachel Reeves and even wrote a letter to her, and they got a hold of the letter basically saying, if you tax us more, we're just going to leave. And obviously that meant that obviously Rachel Reeves, who was actually considering maybe going after companies like this to just to get a little bit more out of them, even though they take enough, that the alternative is you have to, you know, keep the two-child benefit cap, you have to cut winter fuel, you have to go after welfare, you have to go after PIP, because this company and many others turned around and said, and worked together, because you know what, these people are unionized in a way, these people work together for their benefit. They all turn around and say, we're just going to leave. They just need to call bullshit on this. They're not going to leave. If JP Morgan and Chase, just for an example, made £10 billion in the UK last year, I don't know what it is, I'm just making this up, and if they were going to have to pay another percentage point on a particular type of tax, and if their profit was £10 billion, if they, you know, suddenly making 100 million less profit or 200 million less profit, but they're still making £10 billion profit, why would they go anywhere? Why would they go anywhere else? It's not a factory that you can just pick up and move somewhere else and get cheaper labor and production. It's London that is the you know, one of the global capitals of this type of sector. You can't just pick up your office and go to Paris, because the type of transactions that they're dealing with in this country and the type of financial stuff that they'll deal with is only beneficial if you do it through London. So it's so frustrating to see a Labour government just give in to these people who have, you know, over the years made so much money and so much wealth. I was digging into the numbers again the other day. another little kind of exclusive. I don't know if I brought this up in the last show. I can't remember, but I did bring up the Sunday Times. But since then, I was thinking more about the Sunday Times Rich List because I brought up in the last show, I think, that they've changed the size of the list because it was getting near 1 trillion. But I have an update for everyone. I was thinking, how can I work out if the list was still the top 1,000 instead of the top 350, which what it is this year, how much would the top 1,000 people in the country be worth? So I just did a little bit of math, started averaging out their average gains that they've made over the last 10 years or so, and calculated retroactively that I think at a minimum, the top 1,000 people in this country are now worth 1.3 trillion compared to 1997, where the top 1,000 people were worth just under 100 billion. So they've increased their wealth by 1,300% in the space of around, 28 years or so. And in the meantime, they're threatening to leave this country. People are having their welfare cut. We're getting rid of winter fuel payments and, not taking children out of poverty while they're filling their pockets and laughing. And that's what's frustrating.
It is frustrating, but is it not common sense that you want to bring more children out of poverty? Like, I don't know, it almost feels asinine, like almost foolish to think that
I
people.
just spilled water on myself.
Oh my god. Oh god. Lewis, bless you. I do have another question for you though. Are you
Sorry, no, it's fine. I spilled a little bit on my leg.
okay? um, don't make me laugh, please. Right, but also you're absolutely right. So, is it not common sense to have children just come out of poverty? So does it not? Is it not common sense to make things a little bit more equal within society, so that people aren't struggling the way that they're struggling? We've got poverty charities, we've got trade unions, even the Archbishop of Canterbury, and they're all urging the abolition of this cap. And a lot of polls out there actually do show that most Britons support action to reduce child poverty, and few oppose removing the cap. So is Labour just misreading public sentiment here? Why are they so willfully ignoring such a wide consensus that calls the policy cruel and unsustainable?
Well, from some reporting, there is a bit of a split in Downing Street between Morgan McSweeney and Keir Starmer, because we know Morgan McSweeney is the apparent mastermind behind, obviously, not only getting rid of Jeremy Corbyn, getting Keir Starmer into power, but a host of other things that we know he's behind a lot of the direction that the party has been going in.
Mm.
And he's got apparently this trust in him from people because he's the guy who can, who's got a track record of being the far right. And this was over 20 years ago in a small little London election, I believe. I don't know what type of power he's consolidated, but this, from all the reporting, does have Morgan McSweeney written all over it. This is his direction, and now for the first time, we're seeing reports on Downing Street having splits about this, and Keir Starmer on one side and Morgan McSweeney on the other. And it does seem like the direction that Morgan McSweeney has been driving in the country, and which is wild to say because he's completely unelected, is starting to fracture the Labour Party. And perhaps we might actually see a change in future. I think the only way, and again, I don't want to take any responsibility away from Angela Rayner or Keir Starmer, but I feel like the only way that we're going to make any progress and Labour's going to gain any ground back is to get rid of Morgan McSweeney, because everything that we know about is his plan. There's been so much reporting on every single move that Labour has made, from migrants to the Supreme Court ruling on trans people to all of these policies that we are constantly criticizing Labour for. It's just Morgan McSweeney, Morgan McSweeney, Morgan McSweeney. So maybe at some point soon, the Labour Party will realise that he has to go. Who knows what cards he's got ready to pull on people, because this is what he's famous for getting rid of people.
Mm.
And maybe that's when we'll actually finally see change, and maybe Labour will start gaining back some popularity. But in the meantime, I don't think there is going to be any change. I think they're going to solidly stick to this direction. Keir Starmer is a person who goes wherever the wind blows. So, yeah, even though if Morgan McSweeney goes, it doesn't guarantee that Keir Starmer is going to change in any way. He might keep going in this direction because he hasn't really got any other direction to go in, I don't think. And the reason that I'm saying that is because if you admit that you have to go then back to the left, it delegitimizes him in a way. The fact that they have to do all of these U-turns, the fact that they have to then go back after the left, bring in all these more lefty policies, it just kind of shows that he's not really making decisions that are the best for the country. He's just making decisions to try and stay in power, which is why I think he will be replaced. I do.
He might not, but with the way that I think the Labour Party move, they are relatively unpredictable, I think, in their approach.
I
But
heard West Streeting has been taking backbenchers out for drinks every other evening to try and,
what?
shore up alliances.
Oh my god, where's streeting? One-way streeting, eh? Little cheeky little minx. Right. We'll get on to our final story in a second. Do we have a video to show? Perfect. Let's show the video.
For the last 45 years, there has been a massive transfer of wealth from the working and middle classes to the top 1%. Billions of pounds have been taken from the workers and handed to the economic elites. In 2008, the world came to a standstill. The market had failed. Capitalism was in crisis. Yet 16 years on, nothing has changed. The bankers weren't jailed, the banks were bailed out, ordinary people lost everything. It's 2025 and we are now reckoning with a Labour Party that seeks to implement a Tory agenda. We face rising right-wing forces, more division, more misinformation. Yet no one in the mainstream media wants to talk about the real issue, the economic elites who have increased their wealth while the rest of us have become poorer. This isn't just a crisis of inequality, it's a crisis of democracy. The rich aren't just getting richer, they're owning everything. We are facing a global oligarchy and nothing is being done. Why? Because of our media. The same oligarchs who hoard wealth also control our press and now our social networks. This is why independent media isn't just important, it's necessary. It's why we're calling on your support. Turn Left is an organisation run by 5 volunteers working around our full-time jobs. Your contributions have already made a huge difference, whether by covering rallies, producing vox pops and interviews, or upgrading our equipment. That's all possible because of you. But we can do so much more. We can be far more ambitious. So head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support, become a monthly supporter, or give a one-off donation. If you want to fight back against the billionaire class, then help us build a media for people, a media for planet, a media for socialism. Smash the oligarchs. Join Turn Left.
Hello, we just wanted to quickly note as well after the video that we know that something has happened, obviously in the last hour or so, the Liverpool victory parade. Obviously, there are some very shocking images going around on social media, a car driving through a crowd of people at the Liverpool victory parade. Immediately, there was lots of information flying all over social media about who this is, what their intentions are. We don't have all the information, but the police have already released that a 53-year-old white man has already been arrested. It's more than likely that the police have had to describe it in such a way because of speculation that was immediately happening online about who this who this person was. So obviously more information will come out soon. We have no information on anybody who's been specifically hurt or if anybody has been killed. We do not know at this point. But we just wanted to quickly inform you because there's so much speculation going on online at the moment and lots of misinformation. But that is the official release. That is the official release from the police right now.
Official police, and so the police have said not to share the videos as well. Yeah, so they've said the police do not want, obviously, misinformation to be spread. I think we've seen how that happen, how awful that turns out to be. But then also, yeah, no videos being shared of it. But will people listen? Probably not.
Yeah, I think I just want to quickly point. It's important to I track any type of these cases that come up, not just necessarily potential terrorist attacks, but every time something like this happens, the online writer immediately trying to do a southpaw almost immediately as soon as these things happen. It gets frustrating when this news was coming out. So I'm just hearing something from the producer. What's that, Callum? Yeah, sure. So I'll just quickly go over it again. So in Liverpool, they were having their victory parade for winning the FA Cup, and a car has sadly ploughed through the crowd. There's some online videos which are incredibly distressing to watch. However, they've arrested a 53-year-old white man who was pulled out of the car, and there's been lots of speculation online immediately about who the perpetrator is. Lots of misinformation, very Southport-esque type of situation immediately, with lots of people online online, immediately blaming a migrant. So the police have had to come out and immediately give this person's details. We don't know the name of the person. We just know that is a 53-year-old white man who has been arrested. And the police have just asked people online not to speculate about any more information in the meantime. We have no information on who has been hurt, how many people have been hurt. But I'm sure, obviously, after the show, if you check online, we might have more information by then. And I just hope that anybody who's watching, anybody who's got any family members there, because there's a very big crowd, obviously, we hope everyone is okay and it's not as bad as the videos look, because it does look quite distressing.
Yeah, and I think anyone who does watch the video, I think, do so with caution. I think, yeah, like Lewis said, incredibly distressing. So yeah, but thank you for sharing. I think it's important to share that sort of information, but also the importance of what the role that we have working within the media, and then people who indulge in media to, again, not speculate or spread any misinformation.
Yeah, immediately on X, so just as the show was starting, when it was on the countdown, I was just looking online in places that I'd rather not be, but I have to keep an eye on these things. But immediately people were putting out misinformation, speculating that it's probably this type of person, that type of person. And it's so frustrating to see people speculating and weaponizing their ideology to try and push an agenda online when people have been probably very severely hurt. It's so frustrating.
I think it's something we said all the time. Please stop weaponizing the most tragic events as a means to assert a political agenda, because these are people's lives and livelihoods, and people are obviously traumatized by witnessing that and being involved in that as well. Something that should be quite a massive celebration, with them winning the Premier League, has now turned into something quite dark. But I will move on to our final story. So, an article in the Times this morning has shown that rising taxes on second homes and holiday lets have significantly reduced property prices in Britain's most expensive coastal areas, revealing that being more hostile towards landlords and speculative property ownership can ease the housing crisis. Homes in Salcombe in Devon, listed as the second most expensive area with an average price of £826,159, have had an even bigger dip of 16% from their 2023 value. And this was specifically due to higher stamp duties, reduced tax relief, and new council tax surcharges. Measures aimed directly at second home owners and landlords. These policies are a response to mounting pressure from local residents who can no longer afford to live in their own communities due to inflated housing costs driven by wealthy investors and holiday home buyers. By making it less financially attractive to hoard housing for profit, the market is shifting. More homes being put up for sale, even price growth is reversing. This increases availability and affordability for local people. A more aggressive stance on landlords and second home ownership isn't about punishment, it's about restoring balance in communities and prioritising homes as places to live, not profit. Hostility toward landlords through regulation and taxation is proving to be a pretty powerful tool in cooling overheated markets and addressing the root causes of housing inequality. Lewis, I kind of want to bring you in. I mean, I'm a huge, abolish landlords, get rid of landlords, blah blah blah. I do deem them as an economic deadweight in society. We've got £85.6 billion that goes into an unregulated rental market. We've got housing prices that are soaring. What does this mean for the future of housing for the people trying to get onto the property ladder? What does this actually mean?
I think there's one aspect of this story as well, which actually isn't in like the main description of what we talked about, but I really wanted to bring this up, is that when I was looking to this story earlier, I was looking into all the different local councils, because it's not just one place, it's lots of different local councils and county councils. And I was surprised to see in the specific area that we mentioned, what was it? Was it Salcombe? I don't remember pronounce it. The area that it's in, it was a unanimous vote. It was Greens, Lib Dems, Conservatives, and the Labour Party, like unanimously voting and lobbying the like central council from the local to the county to push this and pass this through. And I thought that was a really nice thing to see, because it kind of shows you what happens when everyone works together, all the parties work together, which I'd love to see more of. And I think it's probably highlights the fact that, local politics isn't often very partisan. It's usually people work together a lot more. It's less reported on, which isn't necessarily a good thing, but that probably actually does help in a weird way, of people not constantly fighting against each other in the media to try and win votes over. And it shows what you can get done, and it shows that there are both, conservatives, Lib Dems, Labour people out there who are willing to do this, who are willing to go after landlords. And this is something that we now need to see more on a national level. That one area with a 16% decrease. And yeah, it's probably fair to say that because these properties are so expensive, I think it was like 800,000 for like the average house. Like, yeah, they're probably more subject to, big occurrence of change when it comes to the house market going up and down. But it just kind of shows you, imagine if something like this would have been done, 10, 20 years ago, right? How much cheaper would houses be right now if this was in place all those years ago? We'd probably still have, obviously, a housing shortage, but we wouldn't be in the place that we're in right now where, the property that I live in and rent out, has gone up by, I think it's 25, 30% just in the last like 5 years. And luckily, my landlord didn't put the rent up too much this year. But disposable income is still massively low in this country because of the outsized cost of things like rent. And I feel like these types of stories should be pushed out more. And I'm really surprised that the Times reported on it, but they did refer to it as a tax raid. They weren't being too negative about it. But at the same time, they didn't really frame it as a good or a bad thing either. Perhaps maybe slightly more objective reporting, except the phrase that they used, tax raid. But we're in a housing crisis right now, and nobody should be profiting off of this at all in any way. You know what? Maybe on principle, people can maybe criticize me for this. I think if we lived in a perfect world where we had zero housing crisis whatsoever, I wouldn't necessarily be against people having a second home if that's not conditional on anybody else having a home taken away from them. I wouldn't necessarily be against it, I don't think. However, in the current climate, for the last couple of decades, we are short on this, massively short on this. And it needs to be addressed, and the action needs to be taken now, because the only plan that I see from any of the major parties, and this is Labour, Conservative, and I hate to say Reform, but obviously they're the one who are getting the most media attention and getting the most traction and are the highest in the polls, is we just need more growth. That'll fix everything, just more growth.
And how does that happen? Like, how do we get more growth? And the thing is, though, I think this is really positive news, because, like you said, this whole idea of collectivism, that if we actually collectively came together to sort housing inequality out, to actually, I think, bridge that gap between the wealthiest and the poorest within society, and closing that gap a little bit more, then we might see a more progressive and equitable society. Housing is a fundamental right. I say this every single time. Everyone has the right to shelter. So the fact that people are struggling to get into spaces that they can fortify a home within is so sad, and it's insane to think we're saying this in the 21st century. And I think, like, Lewis, you relate to this on so many levels, given you kind of grew up the same way that I did, but having grown up within, social housing, council housing, temporary accommodation at one point with my family, we've experienced the hardships that come with trying to get onto the property or trying to get into housing. And the fact that it's still happening, and then happening tenfold within certain communities, is very, very scary and frustrating. But news like this does need to be pushed out. So it gives people hope. I think we live in such a pessimistic world sometimes, but I think this provides some sort of solace and hope.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk around, like, in theory, economically, if you build more houses, it's not necessarily going to take house prices down, unless you really build. But it's supposed to just slow the prices from increasing more quickly. However, this shows that there is a policy out there that could actually potentially decrease houses, which obviously has a cost benefit analysis that people need to take. Obviously, if I was just a voter who was a landlord, I'm not defending them. I'm just trying to put myself in their shoes and how they would think, is that, I've got an asset which has lost 10 or 20% value because of this government, I'm not going to vote for them. So that's why you have to, I guess as a politician, think about, if we implemented this, are we going to, make lots of people lose lots of money? Not that I care about those people, but there is definitely policies that they can bring in here to stop this from happening. It doesn't have to be exactly what's happened in these circumstances, but it just shows that just by pulling some easy levers, right? Council tax, for a rich person doesn't really cost that money. So I do find it interesting how doubling council tax for some people has actually had a massive effect on people not wanting to buy these properties, because that's what they've done. They've effectively doubled council tax in all these different areas. Obviously, there's the extra stamp duty that's done at a national level. That's a great policy. It's a deterrent. For me, I'd just stop people from doing it. I just stop the fact that right now we're in a housing crisis. Nobody else can buy any more houses. That no landlords can expand their monopoly. I would stop all private companies from being able to buy any more houses, and I'd probably go further and tax the hell out of all the foreign investors who are foreign landlords
I
in this
agree.
country, because it actually, I think when somebody did the maths a few weeks ago, when you combine how many companies private companies own and then also combine it with the amount of properties that foreign investors own who live in other countries, it's somewhere in the region, I think, of about 1.2 million homes, I think, in the UK. So imagine what that could do if those were more freed up and the market was a bit more saturated. It would really help decrease the prices and make it more affordable for people.
Could you imagine? It's true. You don't need some ecologically damaging mass house building, uh, proposal or like any of these things to be happening. What you could be doing is, in my opinion, completely abolishing landlords. But I know that sometimes people don't think that that's practical. But your solutions were a lot more practical than mine. So I do want to bring our producer in for the comments. Hello, Callum.
Hello, can you all hear me?
Yes. Can you?
Yes.
Wonderful. Right. Hello, everybody. Hope you're all okay. It's been one of these shows where a lot of the talk in the chats have been about other things, which is great. We love conversations, but I gather there's been some people in the beginning that have been causing a bit of a ruckus and starting some conversations. So we'll go through these. Let me just start with this. I don't know who's... Oh, okay, it's Specs, but for some reason it's not showing. So, Specs has gifted some memberships.
Ooh, thank you,
Thanks,
Specs.
Specs.
Specs is always coming
So we've
in.
got all these wonderful people here who've all been gifted
you.
a membership by Specs.
Thank
I think that's
you.
5. So thank you very much for those. We're always grateful. Let's start at the top. So I'll just start at the top and we'll work through. We've got this one from the top of the show from Jacqueline. How come when there's tech issues, they always blame the women?
I will say today was definitely my fault. I will
It's
put my
usually my fault, let's
it's
be honest.
Lewis,
It was I think it was a double whammy of Sarah not knowing that she was live and Lewis muting Sarah at his end and me in the background going, "No, it's fine, you're on, you're on, you're on." But there we are. Becca said, "Gorgeous young woman as always, Sarah."
Oh, love you, Becca. Love you.
You still get ID'd sometimes, don't you?
I get ID'd all the time, actually.
You
Got
do.
ID'd recently for Red Bull. I never even drink Red Bull. I don't even like energy drinks. Got it for someone else.
We got this one from Vicky about the Overton
I
window.
judge people who drink energy drinks.
I don't drink energy drinks, by the way. Just putting that out there. Don't make me shame.
Overton window might have changed definition of left and right wing. Policy hasn't, though. And I think that's quite an interesting one when talking about policy, whether it's about reform and whether they're left wing or not, or Angela Rayner not willing to talk, on really important matters. I think it's right, isn't it, that the policy hasn't changed what's right and left, and this argument of reform somehow offering left wing, but bear in mind this is the Reform Party who believe that Keir Starmer's offering us communism right now. So but what are your thoughts on
Sorry,
that
that made me
comment specifically about the Overton window and the fact that policy hasn't changed the definition of left and right?
Yeah, so I just quickly that comment about Starmer being a communist, because people say that all the time. They're like, "Oh, you lefty loons, you're all communists," and even Labour supporters are apparently communists. I'm like, "Oh, furthest from the truth." Like, not at all. But no, I would agree with that comment. I think the Overton window has certainly shifted, right? But left and right wing policy, yeah, I think hasn't. But what's interesting now is that we're seeing, and we said this earlier in the show, that the Labour Party, a party that should be all about welfare, a party for the working people, is now shifted considerably to a side that it shouldn't be at. So I don't know what the future holds in terms of politics as a whole, but it kind of goes back to what Lewis was saying, where I feel like all the parties kind of are aligning in one way or another. They're echoing kind of the same points here and there. But with Rayner and her unwillingness to be open, transparent, and honest about the 2-child benefit cap, arguing that we don't want to speculate what the government might do, is because I think she's trying to leave room for the fact that they might do U-turns and might change their mind at some point and might try to win votes in a certain place that they didn't get it before. So I don't know. I feel like it's all a bit all over the place at the moment.
Yeah, and as well when it comes to policy and people itself, the frustrating thing about Nigel Farage trying to create this, broader church, is the fact that uh, I say this often, and people can push back maybe, but I feel like at least when Conservatives and the Labour Party come forward with their policies, that they either make sense in a way. Not that I support them, but like they make sense. They have a pathway. Here's how we're going to do it. And obviously, sometimes there's some unrealistic things in there, but nothing that's too far stretched. But Nigel Farage can literally say anything, and nobody will care how he's actually going to do that thing. He can just put anything out there. It's like his entire contract, or what most people would call a manifesto, is it was so uncosted and unfunded that he did not get enough pushback on this. I think it was to the tune of somewhere in the region of £100 billion. He wanted to cut taxes and increase spending, but just nobody cares. Nobody cares about the policy. And I don't expect everybody to read everything, but even the general idea of how things will work is highly frustrating. And it just really frustrates me in so many ways.
So many ways.
So many ways.
We've got this one from Luna. Hi, Luna. Farage having private meetings with Trump, J.K. Rowling having private dinners with Starmer. I'm not sure which story. It was 41 minutes ago, so I think this was during the first story. But it's interesting again, this idea that our politicians are having all these private meetings with some not particularly nice people.
Well, just to throw a third thing in there as well, because this was reported in Politico, but not really, I don't think, anywhere else that I saw it. But the lobby groups, the good old like typical Tufton Street people, are now starting to potentially shift and have meetings with Reform and Nigel Farage. Richard Tice did comment on this, and he's like, "Oh, we're welcome to hear other people's ideas." They're just forming into a typical British party, but they continue to be able to market themselves as something new when they're not. They're just something really old with a new marketing technique.
Rebranded. We've been saying this consistently on the show. Like we've been saying this, show after show after show, that they're just rebranding themselves. And I wish people could see that. But I don't think they can.
I know I brought one of Jacqueline's up before, but I just wanted to address this one. Socialism has never been given a chance to work. And I think that's really important when having these conversations about different parties and what they're offering, because like we said before, these claims about Starmer and communism, we hear this time and time again, but the reality is that it's not actually been given a proper chance to work. Certainly not in the UK. And I think part of that is because people are quick to, like this bloody nonsense, reform left wing, because they want to stop they want to scrap the 2-child benefit cap. People hear stuff like that, and that's how they understand politics, left and right. And because Labour have historically been left wing, and because Keir Starmer dared to offer some policies that were certainly based in socialist values, people automatically assume that what we're getting today would be socialism and is socialism, when in reality it's not. And if we actually give it a chance to work, we might see an improvement in the country.
Yeah, I think the only way I think socialism is really truly going to work is when you get at least a few countries kind of like working together in a way, almost like not just like isolated within one country. It needs to be a bigger and wider movement, because obviously what happens in history is when people move towards socialism, communism, is that they often get isolated. There are cases, and we know of information and evidence. I'm not going to quote any of them because I don't know the specifics of Western governments, doing bad things towards these countries and making them fail. And I don't want to like quote the CIA and sound like one of those like tanky type things, because what they basically do is like they say that any failure is just the CIA, which isn't true. But there is proof that America has intervened in these countries who have moved towards socialism or have moved towards communism. That's not become failure of all socialist and communist countries. But there is intervention from the capitalists essentially to make a lot of these systems fail. So I think the only way that we could properly do it is by doing it as a larger community, so we can all help support each other. And I think that time will come at some point. The bubble will pop, but we'll have to see.
On this point, Curtis is watching and has said political systems don't crop up from states to states. They start with with small experiments which often fail. The socialism never worked trope is a historical of how capitalism came about.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It kind of jumps quite nicely. It kind of links quite nicely to Lewis's last point that I think everyone views capitalism. I'm not capitalist at all, by the way, but I think we work within the system, unfortunately. But the way that capitalism works is that it's not creating a broken system. It's not broken. It's working the way that it's intended to work. And I do agree if that we'd actually, and this is the whole crux of it, that collectivism will be the way that we can actually move forward. We're living in such an individualist society where everyone is kind of just like, well, I have to work hard in order to get the things that I need to get, or I have to work hard in order to be better than my next door neighbor, and that's not working in anyone's favor. So if we did give socialism a chance, and we might actually stop seeing these myths and misconceptions about, well, where socialism works, it's never going to work in society, and blah blah blah. It's because no, you've literally been brainwashed into thinking that capitalism is the only way forward and nothing else can possibly replace it, when that's not the case at all.
Yeah, and on top of that as well, like capitalism promotes so much individuality that that's also part of what's broken apart our society in so many different ways. These same conservatives or libertarians who often support or prop up capitalism as the best system ever are the same people who are screaming at people that they need to have more kids, they need to have more babies, they need to keep the families together. When capitalism does anything but these things, it makes all of these systems worse. It exacerbates individuality to such a point that nobody else can think about anybody else outside of their own little bubble, and they don't care the effect of anyone else in society because they think that if they can just somehow take care of themselves, they'll be okay, without realizing that nobody can be okay or thrive in a system where nobody else is also thriving. And this cycle will just continue until it one day pops, and it will pop. How it will pop, we don't know. What direction we'll go in after the pop, we don't know, but it will happen at some point, because you cannot have a system of infinite growth, and when you've got declining populations all across the world, something's going to happen at some point.
I think in following up from that, nice actually, Vicky's comment, pretending people can cope on their own in a system currently set up to fail the many.
Well said. Vicky always comes with some really, really great one-liners that I'm 100% gonna steal.
We should start putting them on t-shirts, shouldn't we?
We should.
And this actually ties back to as well what I was talking about earlier about the private school people in the media and GB News, is that when I was just doing some research on this earlier for a video, I was talking about, these people trying to promote this idea of a meritocracy. And it's not because obviously they, is the good old, what's the good old saying, when equality feels like oppression. Oh no, yeah, like, oh, when you're accustomed to a life of privilege, equality feels like oppression. I think that's the exact quote. These people who are privileged, they have worked hard, their families have worked hard, but what they don't realize is that while they've been walking up a hill, everybody else has been climbing up a mountain. And that's what they don't get, because they can't see past their own privilege to the point where, yes, you've probably struggled. Yes, it was hard. You had to revise. You had to do all these things. But your bubble of privilege allowed you to be in an environment which helped you thrive. And they can't accept that their success is mostly based off of circumstances of their upbringing, which is completely out of their control, which is, again, promotes this idea of individualism. And the fact that these people have such a monopoly over the media who push these narratives is just another expression of why there's not going to be any change until we have a more balanced and fair media. So subscribe to Turn Left.
Yay!
Nobody went to private school here.
Graham, we need a bigger state, more public workers, not necessarily bigger government. What do you make of that one?
That's an interesting one, actually. I would agree. I would agree. I don't think we need bigger governments, because I think we already have a government that is big enough to kind of do things, but they're not doing the things that we desire, because they don't listen to the public. But I would say that the more power that the majority have, which is us working
Mhm.
people who form the minority within society when it comes to power, even though we're a majority group. If we were able to collectively, it all comes back to collectivism. If we were able to collectively come together, then we would really be able to, I think, dismantle these class wars that are being waged and these.
But you know how we get more public workers? We bring more institutions into public ownership. We nationalise our railways, we nationalise our energy companies, we nationalise our water companies. We bring all those things back into public ownership. We stop selling off our health service into the private sector and bring those back into properly back into public ownership as well, and bring all the staff with them, and then there'll be way more public workers.
Yeah, but we don't have a government that works for us. This is the thing. We don't have a government that works for us. We don't have a government that represents the majority. We don't have a government that represents the working people. Like, I'm sorry, but we have, like I said earlier, we have so many people in government. Like, there are many people in government, but it's like, what are they actually doing? Because we beckon and we call and we say, hey, we're not happy with this, we're not happy with that, and they're like, oh, sorry, can't hear you, can't see you. So I don't know. It's just having a competent government that represents the working people.
It's the short-sightedness as well of multiple governments, which has made us spend so much money on private companies. I think there are space in the current system for private companies to have a place in certain respects, but for the majority of the time, if you're providing a service like care or education or health or any of these things, there's no reason why the government can't fully control that ecosystem in a way and that economy. Because I was reading recently, again going back to private schools, but this was a different topic, about how the increase in SEND children being basically signed off as SEND children and needing a SEND plan when they were applying for local schools for a SEND placement. We didn't build enough of them. We didn't have enough places, so the Tories just started paying for lots of kids to go to private schools, and now we're spending about $3.5 billion on sending kids to private schools to meet their SEND needs, and that's going to go up in about 2 years to about $5.5 billion on its current trajectory. Think about the amount of money that they've wasted on this over the last 5 years, and how many schools that could have just built if they would have just spent that money in the first place, put the money up front to build these school places. How much money we would have saved, and none of these private schools would have been, reaping all this wealth from our tax-paying money. It just makes no sense. It's a short-term sightedness, and the Labour are doing it as well. PFIs, you can get into it for hours.
True.
Let's have a look. Luna, I wish all the right-wing billionaires would leave and shut down their media bullshit. Boo-hoo. The left can take care of the media.
True.
Edward Sexpeak, Labour needs to fracture and be replaced. There is no coming back for them. Given their organisation now, we don't have the time. Build a green, red, independent bloc. I'm not sure. I think that was in relation to the Angela Rayner story.
I don't think we require a really good leader to get behind in theory, but I think in practicality, I do feel like too many of us are probably waiting for that next person to come along who's just going to guide us in the right direction instead of kind of doing the groundwork for it. I feel like we're a bit leaderless right now in this sector. We have people who prop up from time to time who get a bit of positive attention. You'll see, Gary Stevenson, for example, who will be like, I think, a solid and respectable voice when it comes to inequality. But there isn't really a person that I can think of who even has the potential to become a leader in this movement that could unite all of these things. And that kind of still makes me sad. Unless anybody wants to, put in the comments anyone that they could think of who does have the potential to really capture people's attention and also be a strong leader. But at the same time, I don't think we need it. But the only way we don't need it is if we start actually working together a little bit more, which is hard.
Yeah, no, it is a really difficult one. How are we doing, guys? I'm just aware of time.
I did actually highlight a comment from Becca. Where has it gone?
Was it the one about filling empty homes, or was it the one about...
Oh, here it is.
There it is.
Like the earth can't bear our abundance already. We are killing the earth with abundance. Be more frugal. I got into an argument with somebody the other night, and they were essentially advocating for the Labour Party and the path that they're going in, but they don't understand the argument that I was trying to have, is that even if Labour want to come in and like adjust the system and make it slightly better, not that they are doing that, but obviously that's what people voted for, that they've got, they're going to make it a little bit better for everyone. That's the idea. None of it's going to work, because whatever Labour do in the next few years, somebody else is just going to come in at some point and change everything, and it's just going to go back and forth and back and forth and up and down. In lots of children in poverty, less children in poverty, and we live. And again, it goes back to the infinite system of growth. Why are people not willing to accept that the system cannot continuously grow? It just cannot. You'll get the right-wing conspiracy theorists all over clips like this, but we need to literally, at least at a minimum, maintain the population of the world at a minimum right now, because we can't continue to grow like this. We don't have the resources. The amount of harm that it's causing to the planet is absolutely abhorrent. And we've got David Attenborough, going viral for his clip on, was the show called Earth or Ocean, I think, where
Ocean.
where like they're showing like the sea getting dragged by the chains, and like clips like that are great. But David Attenborough's not going to be around too much longer, and he's like a great voice in that kind of like Earth space. I know it's really sad, but there's no one else to replace him. Like, we're completely leaderless when it comes to environment, when it comes to the Earth, when it comes to stopping this idea of continuous growth and actually taking care of our planet, and at least at a minimum maintaining the population. And I'm sure all the right wingers will be like, oh yeah, I bet this guy's paid off by Bill Gates to reduce the population. But it's so true. It's just reality. You cannot continuously grow the system. You can't. It's unsustainable.
I think we're going to wrap up. I just want to bring NANA said Liverpool is one of the best cities for showing solidarity to all oppressed peoples. It will not stand for intolerance. Just to obviously address, I know that Lewis and Sarah mentioned it earlier, the events this evening. Liverpool is a city that I hold extremely close to my heart. It's where my girlfriend is from, and I spend a lot of time there. And I can 100% say that the city will absolutely come together in this awful time. What is very telling, though, what is extremely telling, is, Lewis mentioned it earlier, is the way in which certain people have chosen to respond to this incident before we've had the information. The police have clearly made a choice to come out and tell us that they've arrested a white British man, and they've clearly done that deliberately because of a lot of the speculation. They've urged people not to speculate. They've urged people not to share any video or any images of the event either, because obviously we still don't know how many people are injured. We don't know whether anyone's been killed, and there are still people in the crowds in Liverpool at the moment who might be trying to get in contact with loved ones. So we just urge viewers to please bear that in mind when on social media as well. But it does make me extremely angry to see the likes of fucking Lawrence Fox only in the last hour or so tweeting things like, "What is coming next is inevitable," and please DM me any information you have on the driver. It will be treated in confidence. You cannot hate them enough. This idea that because something terrible happens in our country, it has to have been caused by people from a certain demographic, a certain background. We need to find a way as a country to stamp this shit out, because every single time a horrific thing happens in this country, the same racist twats come out and push the same racist rhetoric. And I'm sorry that I'm getting wound up, but it makes me really, really fucking angry, because I've spent a lot of time working in Southport, and I've spoken to people in the community there and seen how what happened there affected them. Like I say, I spend a lot of time in Liverpool, and I know a lot of people in Liverpool, and how that city works and the people in it as well. And it just makes me sick to see people that choose to take advantage of horrific events like this to try and push their racist anti-immigrant agenda, when the people that are carrying out these attacks are British born, and in the case of today it seems white as well. Not that it would make any difference.
Yeah.
And what's frustrating is that this is not a speculation. This is just a complete hypothetical, and I want to make that clear. If this turned out to be, let's say, a far-right attack, they probably wouldn't believe it. The same people who are putting out misinformation would be the same people who will be saying this is just a false flag by the government to make us look bad or something like that, because that is the world that these people live in. I follow so much of this activity on social media. And there was a young lad who lost his life months ago called Harvey Wilgoose. I think it was in Sheffield or Huddersfield. I can't remember which city. And again, because they can use the legal system to their advantage, because he was underage, and I think his perpetrator was underage, that they can't reveal any information about this person. So the entirety of right-wing, far-right Twitter still believes that this was a migrant from another country.
I'll tell you what is interesting as well, though. We are now starting to see the speculation has now moved to, this was someone who took a wrong turn, and they panicked, and all of a sudden, the same people that were calling it a terror attack and accusing it of being an Islamist terrorist 2 hours ago, an hour and a half ago, are now trying to justify it as as possibly just an honest mistake that's ended in tragedy. I mean, obviously, we don't know the motive, and we don't
It's
know
so wildly frustrating.
but seeing the same people speculate one way and then immediately change tact when the police reveal who's been arrested, it just makes me sick. But listen, like we say, we're not going to speculate. And again, just please don't share any images. You will see them, I'm sure they are horrific, but don't sort of let the fire spread. The police need time to investigate. And it's my understanding that Merseyside police were due to have a press conference at 9 o'clock today. That has been pushed back slightly. I'm not sure to what time, but
yeah, there was another update saying counterterrorism police are investigating. That's it. Doesn't mean it's a terrorist attack. They're just involved at this moment because, of course, they would be. I'm sure it's probably standard procedure, and we'll get more information later.
Yeah,
We will. And I just want to say one thing in that, Callum, you're right to be angry. I think all of us should be angry, particularly when things like this happen. But more so because whenever things like this transpire, people forget that victims are involved in the process of this, and that people have had to witness something quite traumatic, and they too are victims in this as well. And when people sit behind their keyboards and speculate over the race or religion or background of this individual as a means to assert some anti-migrant, anti-Islamic, just warped rhetoric, I think it says more about them than it does anything else. And I think it comes back, I think the reoccurring theme throughout this whole show is collectivism, that we all collectively came together to call out that bullshit, but also to make sure that at the forefront of all of this are the voices of victims and victims' families and friends, that they are at the forefront and they are centered in this entirely. I think that is probably the way forward.
Yeah, and it's also worth noting there were some brave people in some of the footage trying to stop the person as well, which is, I hate to use the word nice to see, but it shows that people are willing in Liverpool specifically to put themselves in danger to try and obviously stop what was happening.
I just hope to God people are okay. I mean, it was supposed to be, a day of celebration for Liverpool. It was a huge win for the city, well, for the Liverpool supporters in the city certainly, and it was supposed to be a day of celebration and of joy and of love, and for so many now, this is all that it's going to be remembered for. And I just hope and pray that everybody's okay, because it's horrific.
Oh, thank you, Graham. Graham just sent $4.99 for collective leadership.
Thanks, Graham.
But thank you, Callum. Is there anything else you wanted to say?
No, just thank you both for a fantastic show as always, and obviously thank you to our incredible community who stick by us even when we're experiencing technical issues.
True. But no, thank you so much, Callum.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lewis. Thank you. You're always so insightful. I learned so much from you. But I realized I have.
It was a good show. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. You're the best ever. Thank you.
Stop it. Go on.
I'm not going to glaze him too much. But that's all we have time for. It's been so amazing having each and every one of you here. I think we like Callum said, we have such an incredible community, and I think that's not something that we overlook. We see you and we do hear you. So yeah, so thank you for joining us. Remember to obviously like this stream. Can I start again? Remember to like this stream, and if you're not a subscriber, then please hit that button. Oh, I can't stand saying it, but it's true. Hit the button. But if you want to see us grow, then you can head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. And there is a link to our Patreon. I'm reading it from here, where you can support us monthly or follow the other link to give us a one-time contribution. But as ever, please don't put yourself out. Alternatively, you can become a YouTube member for just 99 pence. And we are also now on Facebook. Yes, what a great source. What a great source. But thank you so much again. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. I'm Sarah Dallal, and I'll see you guys next time.
Support independent media. Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.